To the meeting. Welcome to the people at the back. I hope you enjoy the meeting. We'll move straight into the agenda. Item 1 is attendance. We're all present. Declarations of interest. Linda.
Thank you, Leader. Before I deal with the declarations of interest that Cabinet members may have, I've just spoken to two of our members who are sitting in the public gallery, but they'll know that interests are also caught because you're attending a meeting. So Councillor Davis and Councillor Tomlinson, you're both council-appointed governors of Garnteg. Is that agreed? Thank you. We'll catch those in the minutes. And then, as far as Cabinet members are concerned, Councillor Gwynaira Clark, you're Council-appointed Governor of Garnteg and Brynteg Nursery, so those are both personal interests to declare.
Yes, I agree, Linda. Can I just add, I've been given a petition by the chairman of Victoria School from the parents, the governors and friends of the school, past and present. There's signatures here of 1,434 and also an online petition of 587 with over 2,000 names on these two petitions. Can you allow me to present that, or is there a procedure you need to make me aware of?
Councillor Clark, there's no provision for petitions to be presented to Cabinet, but of course a member can, at your request, a member of the public can present a petition to a council meeting, and the next council meeting is on the 20th, and there are provisions for it being submitted at least 2 days before, so it's about 10 o'clock on the 16th of October, but obviously that can be discussed outside the meeting if that is the case, although I would point out that Cabinet haven't made any decision yet, and of course consultation, should that proceed, there then would be time for members of the public to make their views known through that consultation process.
Thanks for that, Linda. I realise the decision hasn't been made yet, but I needed for you and the Cabinet members to be aware I've accepted the petition and I'll follow procedure.
Minutes of the last meeting, we'll go through those. Page 5, 6, 7, that's it. All agree the true record, please show. Thanks very much. Now going on to item 5, which is the action sheet.
Thank you, Chair. They are there for members' information unless there's any questions.
Any questions to the Chief Executive? If not, then we're straight into item 6, which is Nigel Aurelius, Financial Planning 2016-17. Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Leader. This is the second report in terms of financial planning for 2016-17 to 2018-19. Members had a report in July on this. The background to the report simply takes you through the MTFP and the challenges that we agreed, in March, totalling around £30 million, based on assuming that Welsh Government are going to reduce our funding by around about 4% in each of the 3 years. Further on in the background in 4.5, I do make the point that despite the financial challenges, there seems to be a plethora of new legislation that comes out from the Welsh Government, much of which we would agree with in terms of a policy context, but it's coming without any extra funding by which to implement it. Moving then on into 5.1, and we start to get into the national picture. Members will be aware that the UK Chancellor has announced a spending review and that it's not reporting until late November. I think it's the 26th of November, and therefore the necessary pronouncements for the Welsh Government and then consequently for local government are pushed back. Indications are that we'll get our provisional settlement before Christmas, around about the 9th of December, which, to be fair to the Welsh Government, is good in the context of the late announcement. But the final budget of WAG will be much later and into March, and I think at the moment we just need to be mindful that that could cause us problems with us having to statutorily set a budget by the 11th, which effectively means you've got to do it at least by the 10th of March. In 5.2, I mean, everyone's pretty clear within the public sector that things are going to get more and more difficult, and obviously if Welsh Government continues to provide more funding to the NHS over this period, then it'll just squeeze it further for local government. Despite that, as I say in 5.2, you as a Cabinet will need to push on, even in these uncertain times, even without information, and start to make decisions to allow for the necessary scrutiny, engagement, and consultation, right across Torfaen. I made the point earlier that I've assumed a 4% reduction in each of the years, together with a specific extra reduction in 16-17 around leasing. But I do make the point that whilst I hope that's worst case scenario, and that we are in line broadly with other authorities, I can't guarantee that. There'll be the impact of the spending review, whether Welsh Government further protect other sectors. Formula and data changes, we lose every time on data changes in particularly, and mostly with formula, because we're a small or geographically small borough, and we're experiencing or hearing noise about significant grant reductions in areas that are funding statutory services, and waste is the most pertinent example of that. Part 6 of the report then takes members through the progress so far. The first part, 6.1, is about the emerging priorities. I make the point that you have a working group of members, which includes the Cabinet, and that you are working on creating, a political vision that you can then turn into a corporate plan. Lots more discussion, consultation, engagement has to take place, but I list out the 3 priorities that seem to be emerging and have been communicated to me. Keeping the borough cleaner and greener, vulnerable residents, and raising educational attainment. 6.2, that's a repeat from July, because I think it's worth reminding, we really do need to grasp the nettle and set a 3-year financial plan with clear targets for 17, 18 and 18, 19, and not just default to sorting 16, 17 out. We need to do that for financial sustainability and also for the forthcoming corporate assessment in the new year. Then in 6.3, I update on progress in relation to the work streams that we brought out in July. You've authorised a second phase of the work aimed at creating a new operating model, which is, in the first phase aimed at eradicating a lot of duplication from across the council and protecting frontline service provision. We're well underway with an asset management plan. And I do think we need to keep in focus. We have lots of buildings, and we need to shrink out of those buildings in terms of an operational sense, and make economies where we can. We're reviewing fees and charges with a view to developing an income strategy, with a view to putting charges up. Looking at procurement, the transportation review is going well, to creating an integrated transport unit and letting contracts on a collaborative basis across the council, and that's going to produce savings. Technology, and you consider demand management at your last Cabinet. In July, I indicated I've asked all services for 10%, with the exception of social care at 2%. We've had all those. We're working through those, and a full list of those will come to your PDF on the 15th of October. In addition to that, we're starting to review the assumptions within the medium-term financial plan as we work through the estimates. I've revised the pay assumption down to 1% rather than 2%, because that's what the Chancellor has announced within his budget. But there are still a lot of pressures in that area that will want that figure to go up. But it's not really affordable at 1%. We're looking at the cost of introducing the living wage and the implications for that, and to build that into our planning. looking at the council tax reduction scheme and seeing what those levels are and whether that can assist. The buoyancy of our council tax base, we do have new developments, we do have new houses coming on stream, those should be being built in, and developing a council tax strategy. 6.6 then just indicates the meetings that are coming up between now and Christmas, and all I want to say on there is we need to put some pace into some of the decision making now around this. And the last part of the report is just taking the opportunity, because I was at Cabinet, to report on a pretty good position as at month 5 in terms of monitoring within your discipline being displayed, particularly an improving position in social care and housing, which will hopefully help us in 16-17 as well. But there'll be a full Q2 position at your next meeting. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that. Anthony?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Nigel, for the report. As you said, the second report on the budget situation going forward, and I think it's an important one to note the situation at this point before we move forward with considering formal decisions. I think it's important to take that as a separate step, if you were, to paint the picture that we face. So I welcome the report, if not the bleak picture that it paints for the funding of local services, and that's true across the country as well as in Torvine. It's important to recognise the picture that's painted at 4.1 in the report. There's £30 million of challenge, as we often say, euphemistically, over 3 years. And faced with that, I think it's important for us to say very clearly, both within the organisation and outside, that the status quo isn't an option. We can't just carry on doing things as we've always done and hope that everything's going to be okay. And I think that's something that needs to be recognised across the organisation. I say that because Nigel enjoys great confidence and his team across the organisation, and that's a good thing. But it can't mean that we put our heads in the sand and wait for rabbits to be pulled out of hats, because there just are none. We've also got to maintain the focus across the 3 years, as Nigel said, not just the one. And that's despite the lack of information coming from above our heads, both from the UK and the Welsh Government. That's something that I've expressed concern about before and will continue to express concern about. They regularly, quite rightly, ask us to plan for the future in financial terms, and that's something they should expect of us. It's something our residents should expect of us. But it's much more difficult when we're given no information to plan from. And I think the autumn statement, as it used to be called, seems to be getting ever later. I don't know if that's just an impact of climate change, but it makes it very difficult for us to set a proper budget for the March to come, when we're not getting information until December, and then not getting sort of final information right until the week where we have to start setting things like our council tax rates. If you ask someone to plan, if you ask any of us to plan our budgets for our households and then don't give us how much money we're going to receive in our wage packet at the end of the month, then we'll look at you a bit strangely. I think that's the same situation with councils going across. So there are some tough decisions ahead, and I think it's our job, as I've said before, to do all we can to protect our communities and to be as efficient and innovative as possible to limit the impact. But I think it's important to say it's clear where the responsibility for the situation facing local services lies, and it's with the people currently debating the way forward for our country in Manchester this week in Conservative Party conference. I think whilst we have to do everything we can to plan to protect our communities and to limit the impact of funding cuts, the message has to go back across to the UK government that local services can't keep being cut as savagely as they have been done. There is a breaking point, and it's a breaking point that will affect people right across our communities.
Thank you for that, Anthony. Anybody else want to make a comment? Dave?
Yeah, a specific question on the living wage. Is that a realistic situation, given the cuts that we face? It would be great if we could implement that. What are you doing around that area? How optimistic are you?
I'm doing what I'm being asked to do politically, and what I'm doing up is costing the impact of the living wage in 2016-17, both in terms of cost terms and what impact it may have on things such as our single status, spinal points, etc., etc., etc. And then I will be bringing that back to elected members for you to make that decision.
When is that likely to be?
certainly before Christmas, so that you can build it into your planning, and hopefully some headline information and implications at the PDF on the 15th of October when you first see the savings plans.
Right, thanks for that. Anybody else want to make a comment? If not, you see the recommendations on page 20 to note the report. All agreed? Sure. Thanks for that. Now, before I move on, I should have, at the beginning of the meeting, carried out a little duty, which was to congratulate Duncan Smith, who's just gone through an interview process this morning and has been appointed as the person that's going to lead the neighbourhood and regulatory services. Congratulations, Duncan. Well deserved. I'm sure we all agree with that. Right, thanks for that. Moving on now then to item 7, which is managing the Council's strategic risk register. Again, Nigel, over to you.
Yep, before I go into it, most of the hard work attaching to this report has been done by Kath Turner, who's sitting there in between Ed and Lyndon, who's done invaluable work in really sharpening up our risk register and our approach to this this year. It's a dry report, but nevertheless an important report. It's important that you as Cabinet are cited on the risks that we believe that we face as an organisation and endorse them. In terms of the key messages, we believe we've made good progress this year in looking at the risks. During this past year, the Corporate Risk Management Group has undertaken a full review of all the risks with the Chief Officers to completely refresh the risk register and completely update it. The risk management policy has been changed and amended and approved by the Council's leadership team in November, Councillor Hunt in December 14, and then the Audit Committee on the 17th of December 14. So we've completely revised that. We slightly changed the scoring matrix to make it a little more neutral between likelihood and impact, because we found we had risks that you couldn't move or shift, irrespective of what you did. Attached as an appendix is the full list of risks, going from very high, medium, and low, and they're there for members' information. So what I'm asking Cabinet to do is to note the work undertaken during the past year to improve it, agree the revised risk register, which is attached to Appendix 2, and also to agree to receive regular monitoring reports on how we are managing those risks on a 6-monthly basis. So you get these reports twice during the year.
Thank you for that, Nigel. Richard?
The likelihood of it happening. What I would find beneficial, especially if we do the recommendations of monitoring this, is if in the risk register that's produced to us, we could see that scoring, so that, well, challenge is the word, so that we can challenge you and say, well, what is the reality of that? So if we are going to monitor and review that, it would be nice to see that. So I welcome the scoring, and if we could just add it to the thing presented to us, it would be helpful.
Absolutely no problem with that. And underpinning all of these risks is a 2- or 3-page pro forma which shows the background of the detail and the scoring. But I think it's a good suggestion to add on for Cabinet, when they get it publicly, those scores.
Right, John.
Can I ask a question on page 29 on the risk register, the rationale of the top one on there, without extra funding, the condition of the Council's highway network will continue to deteriorate, causing disruption to movement. You've got this registered under a medium risk. Now, given that if we don't get any money next year, as we didn't this year, we had to get our own money for it, I mean, that risk surely would be a high risk as opposed to a medium risk, I would have thought. Because even if we get funding for highway maintenance, our highway structure is still in a deplorable condition. And they will never give us enough money to satisfy that, because I think we need about between 18 and 20 million pounds to bring our roads up to standard. So should that be under a high risk as opposed to a medium risk?
I mean, that's something we can take away and consider, but that the scoring was done within neighbourhood services to come up with the scoring of medium in terms of the likelihood and impact.
I would question that anyway. And the other point that we need to be aware of, I think, another one on that same page again, about our waste strategy. At the moment in time, yes, okay, I would accept that as a medium risk at this moment in time. But given the debate going on now with the Welsh Government, with Carl Sargent, of how he's going to maybe change the grant funding of this, which will have a major impact on local government's ability to achieve their targets. And we are looking to the Welsh Local Government Association anyway to fight our corner for us in trying to get this money not paid as a grant anymore, but put into the RDP.
I mean, I would accept that there are risks around all our funding, and that there is a risk around funding, within the overall risk register. So I would capture that in that. And if there's a material change like that to the funding underpinning any of our services, well, then this risk register doesn't stop today. It changes every day. So if that grant suddenly was reduced significantly and it did cause an impact, that would become a very high risk straight away, and we would have to put in some mitigation considerations around that.
Right, thanks for that, Nigel. Anybody else? If not, then we see the recommendations all agreed. Sure. Thanks very much. Right then, now we're on to item 8, which is school reorganisations proposals. Ms. Sills. Dermot. Where's his right-hand man? Oh, there he is. Dermot and John Tush.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet, this report is obviously to consider the outcome of the consultation exercise on proposals to extend both Comfador and Garnteg, to extend and refurbish both schools, and in the case of Comfador, to extend the provision there to include nursery provision, so taking the school from 4 to 11 to 3 to 11 school. Obviously, the paper also looks at next steps in relation to these schools, and necessarily then also looks to consider whether to proceed with the closure of Victoria and Abersac and Victoria Primary and Abersac and Bryntaig nursery schools at the end of 2016-17. And if so, if that is approved, then to commence the formal consultation process. I should say that that means that the new bill, the extension work at Comfador and Garnteg would also be ready for 2017 academic school year. The Cabinet already is quite well versed in the 21st Century Schools programme, so I won't labour all the detail of that. But these specific recommendations, in terms of approval to move forward in the specific proposals, clearly roll in Band A in terms of Comfador and Garnteg, and in terms of the closure of Victoria. And just to remind you, Band A goes from 2014 to 2019. The change we're proposing in terms of the timing of where closures come relates to Abersac and Bryntaig Nursery, which originally was in Band B, which is 2020 to 2022. The reason for that is because we'll have alternative provision available, and that makes sense, therefore, to bring that closure forward. Welsh Government considered the business justification case that the Council submitted back in June 2015 in relation to these proposals. And I'm pleased to say in August 2015 we received approval in principle from Welsh Government for the £4 million capital award from Welsh Government that takes us to a total for the project of £8 million in terms of Comfador and Garnteg. Now, it's intended, as I said, that both facilities will be available from September 2017. In light of the in-principle funding approval for Comfador and Garnteg, and before any final decisions are made, we now need to commence consultation on the proposals, closure proposals relating to Victoria and Bryntaig, and we'll explain why we think that's the case as we go through the report. If that is agreed, and in order to align these proposals for implementation at the same time, we'll need to seek approval from the Minister for an extension of the time period for the statutory notices that have to be published for Garnteg and Comfador. That still means we'll be able to achieve those builds and those extension works in time for 2017, but we basically just need to get our timing right. Okay. In terms of if I just look at the consultation responses now from Garnteg and Comfador in particular, that consultation ran from the 1st of June to Monday the 13th of July. In the report you'll see we've detailed the drop-in events and responses to those, and obviously members have already had a copy of all the responses in the members' library for some time, and in the appendices you have the full consultation response as well. The key issues coming out of that, a relatively small number of stakeholders attended the individual events, and similarly a small number of responses and comments were received in respect of those proposals. The comments received were generally supportive, with support really for the proposals to proceed as soon as possible. Now the code requires this, that's the School Organisation Code, that within 13 weeks of the end of the consultation period allowed for responses, a consultation report must be published, and that's what you have now in the appendix to this document. In 6.5, and in the consultation document, it's page 47 and following, I think, we go through some of the issues that arose in detail, which are outlined there. The consultation document itself, Chair, goes through our responses to each of those issues, so I don't propose to stop in this presentation and look at them, but clearly members can pick up those points in questions. Obviously, a policy impact assessment has been completed, and we do recognise that there will be some impact locally to these proposals. And we've tried to answer how we're going to meet those concerns in the consultation document, but we clearly think that strategically in the long term the educational impact will be positive. The risks associated with these proposals, and this is where we come back in to talk about the potential closure process for Victoria and Bryn Teg, is clearly this is going to raise a lot of concern and already has, as we heard about the petition, from members of the community and the school community and the community at large. That always happens, and it is regrettable. It's one of those things that people feel very, very passionately about, and rightly so. The idea that a school might have to change or close. But clearly we'll respond to those concerns. Clearly there are risks around business continuity and making sure that the business of education continues while all of these proposals are put into effect if they are agreed. For us, as Council, the ability for us to meet and sustain Welsh Government's target for the removal of surplus places is a potential risk here, and that is something that we're now meeting. We've actually met our target from this September in terms of surplus places after all of the work that we've been doing over the last number of years. And clearly within the grant letter that we had from Welsh Government, there was a clause there that says you can have the £4 million, but there is a potential clawback that if we increase surplus places and don't address that issue, at any point over the next 5 years, Welsh Government could come back to us and say, actually, you need to return the £4 million. And that's clearly something that we haven't budgeted for or allowed. So there's a real driver here for us to look at that position around surplus places, hence why we have to consider those closures at this point. The action to be taken following the decision, if the recommendations in this report are approved, we'll put an application to Welsh Government to ask for that extension period to allow us to look at the further consultations around potential closures, which does mean that we'll have to wait a little while, a few months, before we can begin works at Comfortor and Garnteg. As I say, we are confident we can still meet the timescale to get completion for 2017, allowing for that. The consultation on the proposed closures then of Victoria and Abersac Bryn Teg nurseries would be advanced this term, and we'd look to report back to Cabinet early in the new year on the outcome of those consultations, at which point then we'll have all the information that we need to make a decision on all of the proposals. Clearly we've got a duty, wherever possible, to reduce surplus places capacity and at the same time ensure that there is appropriate provision of the right size in the right place. And we think these proposals will enable us to do that and really improve the quality of provision, particularly in that part of the north of the borough. So, Chair, in terms of conclusion, the provision of the improved school buildings, along with the potential further removal of surplus places as a result of these proposals, clearly do form an essential part of our 21st Century Schools programme in terms of providing modern settings for teaching and learning, and therefore removing the need to operate in buildings or grounds which are not fit for purpose and have an unaffordable maintenance backlog. And these proposals clearly allow us to do that. It will help us manage demand for surplus places effectively. It will help us raise additional funding to allow potential borrowing for other aspects of the 21st Century Schools programme, and be able to obviously then to provide a high standard and breadth of education for all the pupils in the community. So, Chair, it's quite a detailed report. There's a lot in there, but I'll stop there and ask for questions.
All right, thanks for that. Now then, the way we're going to work this is that we'll have some questions, and then David Joel will wind up. Conila?
Yes, thanks, Leader. Dermot, can you confirm one way or another to me that the information relating to the consultation, prior notice was given to heads and indeed chairs of schools affected by these proposals? A number of residents are saying they weren't aware of this, and also teachers weren't aware of this, and neither were they aware of the banding.
Obviously, the previous consultation on the 21st Century Schools programme goes back to 2011, so that's a debate that's been live since then. In terms of these specific proposals, particularly around the extension, of the consultation that went out to Garnteg and to Comfort, we did publish that information out to schools in early June. So each governing body of each school maintained in Torvine had that. Head teacher at each school maintained by local authority in Torvine had that as well. The diocesan director, the diocesan director of the Roman Catholic Church, the Church in Wales. So we went through all of that statutory list. There was an issue at Victoria, which meant that the school actually did issue its own letter out to parents, I think on the 16th of June, where it said that it hadn't been informed of what had happened in terms of the consultation. That was a bit of a surprise to us, I hasten to add. So we did have a meeting with the head and the chair as quickly as we could arrange that, which was a few days of them issuing that letter. We explored what could have went wrong. We clearly had the evidence that we had sent that information out. The school confirmed to me within 24 hours that they had actually received that and something had gone wrong in school. So we are confident that that information went out at the right time to everyone that it should have went to. Something went astray with Victoria. That resulted in the chair, the head and myself writing to parents saying, you know, this is what's happened. Here is the detail and the honest position that we had at the time, and that's what we shared with parents. I'm sure that went out 16th of June, or shortly thereafter.
Okay. Well, I remember it because I voted for the 24th school plan at that time. One of the reasons I took that decision then related to the falling numbers in some of our schools, one being Victoria Village School, another was the age and the poor state of the building. I wouldn't argue with either of these because at that time I would be concerned if we had a building that was half full and a building not fit for purpose. Brinteg Nursery again, with the new nursery provision at other schools and projected figures clearly showing that within a few years some staff might lose their jobs because of the fall in numbers. And again, a building costing huge sums of money to maintain. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a major shift in pupil numbers into Victoria School and Garnteg. And this follows the fiasco we had with the school admissions policy for Garnteg, where a number of pupils were unable to get places that, despite living next door to the school, many of these youngsters and their siblings, parents were devastated at this division, and the children and the logistics of getting them to other schools. Not everyone owns a car. I think we need to remember this. I've always believed that children from our ward should have the opportunity to attend schools within the ward. I know this is a government policy, but it shouldn't be at the expense or disadvantage of our children. Victoria and Garnteg were affected by the closure of Pontwened School, resulting in both schools now reaching maximum numbers. Garnteg, 351, plus 40 nursery, 82% in the catchment area. Victoria Village, 217, 71% from the catchment area. Both schools located where the demand is concentrated. And if you look at the report on 10.1, right size in the right place, I really believe that this is absolute right when it comes when we're talking about Victoria Village. I think we need to remember it's incumbent on us as elected members to ensure our children can rely on safe routes to school. That's throughout the report. It's the thing that we talk about now. It's the buzzword, isn't it? Safety to school. I ask that this, if it's possible, to have this item deferred. And the reason I asked for that is to allow you, Cabinet members, to walk with me and realise the difficult route you expect our young children, mothers and grandmothers to travel. I'm a grandmother, and I tell you I don't think I could make the route, but I will, because we need to prove a point here. You can't imagine the distance that children and families would have to travel, given that they're not even on a bus route, should we close Victoria's School and expect children to go to Garnteg. The roads they will be expected to travel, as you'll see if you take up my challenge, is fraught with all kinds of danger, and none are on a bus route, none of them. The same can be said of Brinteg Nursery. Brinteg Nursery is the jewel in the crown of the provision of nursery provision throughout Torfaen. With even younger children, the journey would prove even more difficult to get to either proposed nurseries, which is what you were suggesting. I was given a petition, as you've all heard, of over 2,000 people, and I think, if it's possible, I would add that again and ask you to defer this item unless you take up my challenge to walk the route with me and my ward colleagues to see what it is you're going to make a decision on.
Gwenaira, then you've asked for a deferment. Before we go further, I would ask the Cabinet not to defer this, but to continue on with the recommendations. So let's deal with that first of all. Gwenaira is moving a recommendation and we defer it. I, as the chairman of this committee, is moving a recommendation that we follow the recommendations of the officers. So, first of all, please show in relation to Gwenaira's recommendation. Well, I never thought of that, John. Thank you for right. Have you got a second? Is there a second anyway? Then there's no need to put it to the vote. Then the proposition falls. Right. Is there anybody else who want to make a comment on it? David, then. Oh, Anthony, go on.
Just a number of questions about the report. Firstly, the reassurance about the timescale of the works and that there'll be space for all children who want to go to Garnteg or Cumfredor. Secondly, about the consultation that will follow. Just some details about how that would run and how we'll make sure that parents have a chance to have an input in that. And thirdly, about the quality of the education at Brinteg and Cumfredor, any comments on their most recent inspections so that we can sort of be clear that we're offering good quality of education to all children.
Sorry, Chair. In terms of the timescales, we are confident that even with a delay to allow the statutory consultation process, which is your standard statutory consultation process that we've gone through for other school closures, but I'll come and talk to that in a second. We are confident that we can have those works complete in time, in good time, should the closures of both Victoria and Brinteg go ahead, so those pupils can be accommodated. We're quite confident where we are at the moment. In terms of the statutory consultation, that is your standard statutory consultation, so that will be open to all statutory partners. There will be meetings at the schools. We're not required to do that, but we will have public meetings for parents to contribute to. There will be a questionnaire. There will be a set of questions that they can respond to. The normal sort of round of consultation in terms of having meetings with officers, having meetings with the staff, being able to send in questions, and we'll respond to those through the normal consultation route. And clearly elected members and the whole community be involved in that. That period, I believe, I'll just ask John, lasts for 6 weeks, 12 weeks in terms of the statutory consultation. 6 weeks in terms of the statutory consultation period. So there'll be every opportunity, and we'll listen to every voice that there is, and clearly that will also involve the children's voice in that discussion as well. So in the past we've used the play service to facilitate some of those discussions along with members of staff in the school. So we will have as inclusive a process as we possibly can. In terms of the quality of education at Garnteg is a very effective school. It's come out well in this last, come out as good in this last test and inspection. Its performance this year, particularly bearing in mind it's got one of the highest levels of free school meals in the borough, is exceptional in terms of its outcomes, particularly for children in the National Literacy and Numeracy tests. Very, very strong performance indeed. And Comfortdore's got a good standard of education as well. So I don't have any concerns in terms of providing suitable alternative education in those facilities at all at this point.
Right, thanks for that. Dave, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, just briefly, because there's not a great deal that I can add to, in fact there's nothing I can add to the report. It's fairly transparent and clearly presented. I'd like to pick up on a couple of issues though. We're always cautious, careful, wary and disappointed in some senses that we are moved to consider closure of any school. And it seems that when school closures are suggested, it brings out, arguably, and I generally mean this, it brings out the best in the people from those localities, because it's then that you see the true worth of community spirit, certainly. I'm well aware, I was brought up in Portnewydd and Aberystwyth, so I'm well aware of the iconic almost status that Victoria Village has in the immediate community, and I think that's underlined by virtue of the fact that on Facebook there are inputs from people far and wide abroad that have lived, gone to school in Victoria Village. So it has a history in that sense. And therein lies the tale, I think, because it is an historic, iconic building in that sense. But is it fit for the purpose of 21st Century Schools programme? No, it isn't. And that's the major criteria for its consideration under Band A for closure. I commend the enthusiasm with which the residents, parents and people associated with Victoria Village have conducted themselves. But this has to be seriously considered, and I hope it will go through, because we have a duty under the 21st Century Schools provision and programme to provide the best kind of education we can in the best circumstances, the best buildings, providing the best ambience and environment for future generations. I, for one, consider this to be a good news story, and I know that won't necessarily go down well in too many quarters around the Aberystwyth area, but I believe purely objectively this is a very good news story, and it fits in with our portfolio, if you like, of progress and programmes that we've had in pursuit of the 21st Century Schools programme, which wasn't a programme of our making. We didn't construct it. This is a programme that we've had largely imposed by the Welsh Assembly Government, and we are working within the rules laid down for operation in this sense. But even if that weren't the case, I would still hold the view that this is, generally speaking, a very, very good news story. I think that in the future, pupils and learners in and around the Aberystwyth area will benefit from what we are doing in both Comfortdore and Garnteg. Garnteg, by the way, is considered to be the jewel in the crown. I think Gwynaira herself has commented on that. And Comfortdore also has a fairly solid reputation. And I can only argue that both Garnteg and Comfortdore will be enhanced by the issue coming from Victoria Village to those two schools respectively in the fullness of time. One other point before I finish. As far as agreeing to walk this, what Gwynaira assures me is a very arduous journey, I'm more than happy to do that. I've already agreed to do that at your convenience, and we can do that without necessarily having a deferment, which has fallen anyway. So I'm more than happy to come and walk those routes. And if it's considered that those routes are unsafe, then we will commit ourselves to providing free transport. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue either. I commend the report. I think there's a hell of a lot of work, blood, sweat and tears gone into producing it. We know that it's not going to meet with fulsome approval, certainly by residents in and around the Aberystwyth area, because quite understandably, there is this degree of attachment to what is an iconic institution. But unfortunately, it's an iconic institution that perhaps isn't fit for purpose within the context of the 21st Century Schools programme. I commend the report, and I hope everybody will vote in support of it.
Thank you for that, Dave. I know that yourself and the officers have worked very hard, and I know that they want to work with the residents in that area to achieve what's best. But I just want to, I didn't announce I was going to do this, set in context what we're doing, because the council is on a journey, as indeed all councils in Wales are on a journey, to improve the fabric of their schools in order that our youngsters can have the benefit of that. And since we've started off on this journey, and I understand the emotions of the parents, people become attached to school. And there are many people up there that have attended that school before these youngsters are there now. But I asked the officers the other day to just give us a little bit of an update in terms of what we've done since 2011. And since 2011, we've closed Tulloch's Nursery School with corresponding investment in Nankellin. Again, a painful exercise for the residents locally. We've closed Pontymoyle Primary School with corresponding investment at George Street and Nankellin. Same exercise. We've closed Pontyddrun Primary School with corresponding investment at Pennygarn. We've closed Chemist Vowel Primary School, utilising spare capacity following investment at Griffithstown. And so all those communities have gone through this traumatic exercise of disengaging with something which is very near and dear to them, and probably they went to those schools themselves. Schemes left for us to address, and I'm pretty certain that when we do address these, we'll go through the same process. New school for Blenheim Road, Llantarnam, and Ysgagunllid, Panteg Primary School, to be open in autumn 2016. Now, in order to do that, we've had to close various schools, and it's a difficult, complex exercise, and nobody likes closing schools. So again, as I said, the closure proposals for Victoria Primary School and Brinteg Nursery School, with corresponding investment at Ganteg and Comfordor, funding approved in principle from Welsh Government for the latter, subject to ongoing consultation. So all these communities have been confronted with what they consider to be a very difficult and desperate situation. A new school to replace the existing Crossy Celliog Secondary School, business case currently being developed. Post-16 business case for the 25 million post-16 centre in Cwmbran, currently with the Welsh Government. All these things are taking place within the borough of Torfaen, where we as a council, in following those issues that the Assembly is passing down to us, are trying to improve the fabric of our building, and it is painful for a short while, but the long-term gains and benefits of this is, as David just said and as Dermot has just said. And a further scheme at Pennygarn to complete the £4 million investment in Band A. So, I don't want the parents at the back to go away from you thinking that we are not concerned. We are concerned, we've been through this, and we've got to go through it again in the future to bring all our schools in Torfaen up to a good standard in order that our children can have the best education it is possible for them to have. So, I might have gone on a bit.
I need to come back in, Leader, if you don't mind. I want to pick up the point that you mentioned, David. A good news story? I don't think so. I can't see any good news story for the children of the Aberystwyth ward, quite frankly. Leader, you mentioned other schools that closed. This is the second one. We closed our school at Pentywyn. We now, if this proposal goes ahead, we will only have one English-speaking school in the north of the borough in the Aberystwyth ward. The logistics, as I pointed out earlier, of getting from one point, Victoria Village School, which is an excellent school, I might add, to get to Ganteg is going to be a marathon for anybody. So I was hoping that not just you, David, would have picked up the challenge, but other members around this table, because you cannot make an informed decision unless you really know what we're talking about. So I would ask again that you come with me and my ward colleagues and realise what it is you'll be voting on.
I'm sure we will do that, and I think every member on this table is quite prepared to do that, as indeed we will do with all these other schools that we have to deal with, and all the schools we've dealt with previously. We've had walk-arounds, we've gone and seen the safe routes to school and made provision where it's necessary. David had already moved. I'm seconding the recommendation of this report, and I'd ask you all to show, please. Thank you very much for that.
But it needs to be noted.
Yeah. Over to you, Lyndon.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. By way of background to this paper, it did discuss the opportunity for Torfaen to join the Syrian Vulnerable Person Relocation Scheme. Just by way of background, the European Commission has identified that the current conflict in Syria has triggered the largest humanitarian crisis since World War II. In response to the crisis, the British government has announced that the UK will resettle 20,000 refugees over the term of the Parliament, and it's expected that the UK will receive around 400 refugees per month, and they are likely to arrive in the UK in the near future, but they will be refugees that are already present in existing camps on the Syrian border. A recent summit in Cardiff, chaired by the First Minister, attended by Councillor Wellington as leader of the WLGA, discussed the crisis, and Welsh Government will be providing a coordinating role with the WLGA and will set up a Welsh National Task Force to support participating councils to manage the dispersal programme, leading to successful integration within Welsh communities. All local authorities have been invited to participate to support the resettlement of refugees through the Syrian Refugee Relocation Scheme. What it means: the scheme was launched earlier in January, and it's the first resettlement programme to support refugees based on their vulnerability. The scheme will run parallel to other resettlement programmes and will prioritise help for survivors of torture and violence, women and children at risk or in need of medical care. The resettlement profile of refugees are likely to include families, female-headed single families and potentially unaccompanied children, but a recent LGA circular indicated unaccompanied children are unlikely to be amongst the first admissions to the UK. Generally, the families we should expect to receive will comprise between 4 to 6 people. Existing immigration controls and screening processes are already in place, and any person linked with a criminal history, extremism or war crimes will not be allowed entry and will be excluded from the scheme. Those accepted under the scheme will be provided with humanitarian protections, providing leave to remain within the UK for the next 5 years, with full access to employment and qualifying public funds. And if after 5 years it's still unsafe for those individuals to return, they may apply for full resettlement within the UK. For Council agreeing to participate within the scheme, it's expected that we will have to take a lead coordinating role and link in with our key stakeholders to ensure a safe and successful transition, and includes liaison with both the Health Authority in primary and secondary care, social care services, educational and housing providers, and consideration to specialist commission services as required and dependent upon the dispersal profile and needs of those individuals. In terms of costs, the UK Government has guaranteed the first-year costs for all arrivals incurred by authorities based on actual costs for accommodation, education, health and social care costs. And there are positive ongoing discussions to extend the funding arrangements with the LGA, the WLJ and Central Government post 12 months. Our local position is this report seeks an in-principle agreement from Cabinet for Torfaen to participate within the scheme, and should Cabinet agree, there's considerable work to be undertaken. To undertake the work, the proposal is to establish a Torfaen local task and finish group, chaired by Councillor Daniels, Executive Member for Communities, supported by our team, and reporting to the leader to coordinate our local response and critically link in with those key stakeholders that I've indicated on page 74. The WLJ are continuing to work closely with the LGA and Central Government to the dispersal programme, and should the Council agree to participate, we will support the Task and Finish Group with contact to the Home Office to commence preparations and link to the National Task Force. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that. I intend to put this in some sort of historical back or context. You are right, the First Minister did call a summit in Cardiff on the 17th of September. And I think both the public out there and those people that have been collecting very hard and working very hard, led in the main by people like David Daniels, should know. So at the summit was a number of representatives from a wide range of organisations in Wales. First Minister Carwyn Jones, Communities Tackling Minister for Poverty Leslie Griffiths, Public Services Minister Leighton Andrews, Owen Evans of Welsh Government, Andrew Goodall, Welsh Government, Simon Price, the Dyfed Powys Police, Maria Battle, Cardiff and Vale Health Board, Steve Thomas, the WLJ Chief Executive, Councillor David Edwards, who's the spokesperson on housing in Wales, myself as the leader of the WLJ, Aled Edwards, the Wales Strategic Migration Partnership, Jeff Collins, the British Red Cross, Salam Mohammed, who is the Welsh Refugee Council, Alan Michael, the Police and Crime Commissioner for South Wales Police, Sue Evans, that's our Sue Evans here, who is the Director for Social Services, but is currently the Association's Senior Director, Naomi Eleni from the WLJ, and Peter Davis from the WCBA. Now, the long discussion took place, and I think they went all the way over everything that it was possible to go over, how many people we could have, the problems that's associated with education, the problems that's associated with social services. For instance, I understand that most of the people that's coming could well be youngsters on their own. Attention was drawn to the fact that there's 3 or 4 authorities in Wales that currently understand how to manage these circumstances of having refugees in, which is Newport, Swansea, Cardiff and Wrexham. There's a lot of expertise that's going to be required in order to manage this. It's not an easy exercise. There's the issue around funding, and I know Leighton Andrews made the point that they'd be talking to the National Government, Home Office, in terms of having substantial funding. I think the offer at the moment on the table is 1 year. That's not enough. There'll have to be negotiations around that. And so I congratulate, we ought to be very proud of Carwyn Jones for stepping up to the mark and dealing with this with such speed. And I'm personally very proud that you've done that. So I would congratulate the First Minister in acting fast and putting these things in place. Where we are since then is that I know the Chief Executive have had discussions with Naomi at the WLGA, and we are hoping to take either 4 or 6 families probably before Christmas. All that is in the melting pot and has to be discussed with Lyndon, who will be heading up from an officer point of view, and David Daniels is going to chair this local task force. And the local task force will be Gwent Police and Iron Bevan and University Health Board, social care and housing, education, housing providers, advocacy agencies, refugee councils, TVA, voluntary and third sector, faith organisations and local support network and food stores. I ought to say at this point there is a reason, not only because it falls within his discipline, David Daniels is going to chair this, that we ought to commend David Daniels as someone who in this area have been very, very active with voluntary agencies and people that are concerned about the situation and have worked tirelessly for the last month to 6 weeks on this. So congratulations in all the work that you've done, and all your friends and all those people out there that have made a contribution to the stuff that you've already collected and indeed delivered to various places. So the proposition is that we set up this local task force. The officer that will be administering it will be our officer, and also the David Daniels will be chairing it. Now I know David, you've got a fair bit to say, so over to you, David.
Yeah, I've written a little bit. I hope you bear with me. It's a subject I'm quite passionate about. It's quite emotive. I'd like to open quite unusually by congratulating the Tory Council. A few weeks back, Monmouthshire, they voted to participate in the scheme, which I think is a brilliant thing, and I hope we'll follow today. I'll of course be supporting the recommendations, and I'm proud that Bob, our leader, has been so proactive in leading on this from within the WLJ. I'm proud also because this scheme will offer stability to families and individuals who have suffered trauma and devastation we can only dare to imagine, and because it will offer Syrian children a chance to have a childhood again, after years of living in fear, surrounded by daily bombings and untold atrocities. For years now, Syrian citizens have suffered, caught in the middle of a bloody civil war, which has left an estimated 250,000 dead. Given this daily danger they face, it should be little surprise that millions of Syrians are doing anything they can to escape danger, to protect themselves and their families. Yet even still, we hear words like swarm, tide and invasion being used to describe people like you and me, families like yours and mine, who are fleeing homes and lives they've worked hard for. It was not until the world witnessed harrowing images of the lifeless body of 3-year-old Aylan Kurdi washed up on the shore in Turkey that we seem to understand the true cost of the crisis in Syria, and people galvanised into action. We read of statistics talking about people in the hundreds and thousands, but it's not until we actually see the human cost of the one, that the number of that number, that it properly hits home that whatever superficial differences we may have, we're all the same at the end of the day. Which reminds me of a famous quote from Mother Teresa, actually. If I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will. So please, if I may, I'd like to share with you a first-hand account of living in and leaving Syria from a 16-year-old boy called Wael. This account was recorded from a face-to-face interview with charity workers from Save the Children for a document called Untold Atrocities. I've been here in Zatari for a month now. Why did I leave? What a question. There's no one left in Syria. At the beginning, we could just about survive. We would go to the shelter, we would hide, and we would live. But now they're using different weapons. Before the shelters were safe, but now the weapons destroy even those in the basement of houses. I couldn't stand what was happening. The shelling, the destruction, the torture. At my home in Syria, we dug a hole in the garden to hide in. It was only big enough for 3 people to crouch in, but whenever we knew the violence was coming in, I would climb in there with my brothers. My mother would lead us in, and then cover it over with a corrugated iron, and then throw sand over the top, and we would wait, sometimes for hours. The last time I was in there was from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. It was terrifying. I was so worried that they would find us and kill me and my 2 brothers. We'd hide in the hole when armed men were walking the streets, and in the basement shelling happened. The shelling was almost daily. We'd use the hole at least once a week, often on Thursdays. Thursdays are a big day for massacres and crackdowns because prayers on a Friday can be a trigger for protest. Once I was arrested along with hundreds of other people. They separated out the children, and I was the oldest at 16. I can't tell you how many there were, but there were many. We were forced into a small cell together. There was nowhere to go. There wasn't even a toilet. Just a small hole in the floor. There was a group of small children with us whose parents were wanted. They were perhaps 13 children in total. They weren't allowed food or water. When it was time for us to eat, the group was surrounded by armed men who stopped anyone giving them food. These children were too weak to even cry. They just lay on the floor. They were also subjected to repeated beatings with sticks, worse than us. I knew a boy called Allah. He was part of that group. He was only 6 years old. He didn't understand what was happening. His dad was told that his child would die unless he gave himself up. I'd say this 6-year-old boy was tortured more than anyone else in the room. He wasn't given food or water 3 days. He was so weak he used to faint all the time. He was beaten regularly. I watched him die. He only survived for 3 days and then he simply died. He was terrified all the time. They treated his body as though he was a dog. I wasn't able to think about anything by then. I thought I'd die in that cell and I couldn't see past that. If they overheard us talking, we were beaten fiercely and repeatedly. So we didn't talk. All we heard was screaming, crying and silence. When I left that place, I felt I'd escaped death. Now I feel that no one cares about Syria. No one is helping us and we're dying. If there was even 1% of humanity in the world, this wouldn't happen. I feel as though I'm dying from the inside. At least when I die, this will be over. At this point, Wael begins to cry. Torture is not only physical, it's mental. When you see women and children scream and die, it has an effect. Each and every Syrian has been devastated mentally by this war. Before, I laughed all the time. Now I don't. What do I have to laugh about? Some children from my village have become mute because of what they've seen. Young children are worse. They don't understand. They don't understand why. None of us do, really. They're just sad, terrified children. These children used to be taken to the park by their mother, and now their mothers are forcing them into basements for protection, and they don't understand. There's no way I can cope. No way I can turn over a new page. I've seen children slaughtered. I don't think I'll ever be okay again. So sadly, Wael's harrowing story is not unique. Many more Syrian families have gone through similar experiences and are still going on, which brings me back to why I'm proud that Wales has pledged to do its bit. We have an opportunity to extend a helping hand to children like Wael, to give them a chance to rebuild their lives. The borough's response to recent refugee appeal through donations and volunteers has been overwhelming and has demonstrated that the people of Torfaen readily show immense compassion when the opportunity arises. Well, now we have a chance to be part of changing people's lives for the better, so let's do it again.
Thank you very much for that, Dave. That is very heart-rendering and obviously have upset yourself and many other people. Anyway, we are where we are. Oh, sorry, Anthony, do you want to make a comment? Yeah.
I very much support what's been said before. I won't repeat it. Question of, I trust that the case is being made for sustained funding from the central government that will need to be put in place to help support the people that we take in. My main question, though, is about local volunteers. I've had a couple of messages from people interested in sort of taking people in to spare houses or accommodation they've got. How do we sort of help link that up with the central efforts?
I think that you feed the information either to David or the officer that's running or making the arrangements. Lyndon, you want to answer that?
Yeah, the Chief Executive has identified an individual as well, leader, that will help us link in with this, but any information members have, I'll gratefully receive and I'll coordinate any action with Councillor Daniels.
Right, any other comments that anyone wants to make? David?
Point of clarification, because you mentioned the task group. You didn't mention any housing providers, did you? I didn't hear you say that. But they're going to be key, aren't they?
Yeah. No, there isn't any on here, but obviously Bronavon and the other housing association will be involved in Melin, yeah? In actual fact, we've had messages of support from both housing associations to say that they are pleased that we're actually getting on with doing it rather than sort of hanging back.
We've had positive responses, leader, from Bronavon and Melin, but we've also got opportunities to use the private sector as well. The private sector as well, Councillor Cunningham, because it's absolutely essential that people are settled in the correct locations where they can get the adequate support.
You see the recommendations there? All in favour, show. Thanks for that. The next item on the agenda is item on 10, which is Welsh language. Yeah. You all right, Alan? Yeah.
Like I said, Bogota. Here to seek approval of the 2014-15 monitoring report for the Welsh language, detailing the progress that we've made against the Council's Welsh language schemes 2011-2014. The Welsh language scheme will remain in force until the Welsh standards come into being. You'll see from the report that it's a more concise report than previously brought to Cabinet. This is under recommendations by the Welsh Language Commissioner in preparing for the Welsh Language Standards. Like I said, it shows steady progress throughout 14-15. It also shows some target areas that will be looked at in this year, namely the internet portal on Swoop for staff to use in terms of training, translation services and information for staff. We'll also look at the corporate site. Now, I must add that we were lucky to work with Ysgol Gyfein Gwynlliw over the summer, and we were successful in getting a sixth former from Gwynlliw to come down and help us and gain employment for 5 weeks over the summer to develop the site, and has made tremendous work with this, and hopefully that can carry on in future years. The other thing is looking at third-party contracts and how they deliver Welsh language services, more as a colleagues really, not to be critical of our contract providers, but helping them and as to how they move forward in delivering services. And the last thing then is frontline services, how we can get training to our staff, and also, identifying posts that have a Welsh Essential element. I'd like to draw your attention to point 9.2 with the policy framework, is that any future reports regarding the standards will be brought before full council, and reporting, monitoring of those standards as well, will be brought before full council, so that all members are involved in those discussions. So, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Alan. No then, comments? Anthony?
Just like to thank Alan for the report and for the work that he does. As a council, we're committed to doing everything that we can to help further the Welsh language, as is seen with our commitment to Welsh language education, for example. However, perhaps a message for people beyond here about the capacity of councils across Wales to spend more money on things like the Welsh language standards at a time when, just a glance through the agenda of today's meeting, we'll see that we're having to make very difficult decisions about things like schools funding, social services funding, funding to, we've mentioned the state of the roads and things like that. So I think it would be remiss of us to debate this issue without making 2 points. The first is our commitment to doing what we can to further and support the Welsh language, but the second is that the Welsh Language Commissioner and those in Welsh Government have to recognise the extremely difficult funding situation that councils find themselves in at the moment.
Any other comment, Dave?
I'd like to echo that, because it has been a concern of mine for some considerable time, and I know that Anthony and others around the table have expressed the same view. None of us want to ignore what is considered as our duty or responsibility with respect to the Welsh language, and the guidance we get from that, and the nudges that we get from that direction, the Welsh Assembly Government. But I do think sometimes that they are oblivious to how these pressures result on the ground. We've had a long and sometimes emotional debate, not just here today, but for a long period of time with respect to education and other aspects of the work we do, particularly neighbourhood services as well. And with reduced budgets all the time, I mean, only last year we had, and we have a continuation of it, the adult community learning budget, which is being decimated even as we speak. And so people out there expect us to provide a similar kind of service to that which we've always provided, and we can no longer do that because of the cuts coming down the line. Massive, massive cuts. Yet the enthusiasm for supporting and even expanding the Welsh language issue seems to be continuing unabated. And I share with Anthony this notion that perhaps the Welsh Assembly Government and others outside who would be enthusiastically pushing this even further than they have at the moment, stop, pause and think about the effect it's having, the negative impact that it's having on not just our local authority, but all authorities in Wales. Some perhaps may be more enthusiastic about this issue, I don't know. But certainly when you consider the amount of people that are serviced by the Welsh language provision in that sense in our borough, against the amount of people that we have to service with diminished resources in terms of rolling out all of our services, I mean, it's a big ask, it's a difficult ask, and I think it's coming to the point now where it's virtually impossible. So I hope that the Welsh Government are minded to take on board the sentiments being expressed by people like Anthony, myself and others, because it's about time they did.
Right, thanks for that. I'm sure all the Cabinet members would echo those sentiments. Any other questions, any other points anybody want to make? If not, then you see the recommendations, please show. Thanks very much. That being the last item, we'll close the meeting.